Last time we focused on two corners of thrash's so-called Big Four, Megadeth and Anthrax. Tonight, we turn to the other two pillars, Metallica and Slayer.
I want to send a communicated message to my audience.
Don't get me wrong, Eddie and Vic are icons as large as the bands themselves. But mascots are just the surface. Because before the skulls, before the logos, before the tour shirts and back patches, there were influences, real ones. Comic books, late night horror, Saturday afternoon creature features, underground zines. Is it zines or zines? Nobody tells me. Mythology, street flyers stapled to telephone poles. Your favorite metal bands didn't grow up listening to Metallica and Slayer. They grew up on horror hosts, on Batman villains, on imported comics, on images that were meant to shock you, warn you, maybe even scare you away. And here's the part that people forget. This wasn't happening in a vacuum. While thrash was exploding, New York was building its own visual mythology. Hip-hop crews creating symbols, punk bands turning horror into identity, movements forming around logos the way tribes once formed around banners. This wasn't just marketing, it was signaling. Sometimes it was just about finding your people. Sometimes it was about keeping the wrong ones out. So, tonight, we're not just talking mascots. We're talking metal imagery, where it came from, how it evolved, and why it never really went away. Let's go to the island. So let's go to the island. No, not that island. Rewind. Okay, Staten Island. Yeah, this is where things get interesting. Different islands, same obsession with identity through visuals. First up, Wu-Tang Clan. Now you might think comic books, right? But here's the thing. Wu-Tang didn't just borrow imagery. They borrowed the whole genre. They created their own universe, their own characters, their own mythology. Sure, some of it feels like it comes from comics, but really, they're tapping into the same archetypes, the same martial arts, folklore, and urban mythos that comics are drawn from. And a lot of it, completely original. They made a world that's theirs and instantly recognizable. Then there's Public Enemy. They weren't just a band, they were a movement. The S1Ws, the security of the first world, gave the group a militant substructure. Chuck D as the leader, Professor Griff as the general, and Flavor Flav, well, you know, Flavor Flav. Every role reinforced identity and hierarchy. And if you think that's just music, check out their video for Night of the Living Bassheads. It's a direct lampoon of Night of the Living Dead, and it's a commentary on the crack epidemic. Here again, we see a band taking cultural touchstones, recycling them, and making something original and socially pointed. The point here, like Wu-Tang, Public Enemy were creating myth, visual identity, and a universe fans could inhabit. Parallel to metal, parallel to punk, different languages, same methodology. Meanwhile, in the punk and underground world, New York City had its own visual legends. The Misfits, iconic horror skulls, DIY flyers, hardcore edge. Theatrical, instantly recognizable, and designed to define a tribe. Then there's the Cramps, psychobilly, garage horror, grotesque, campy, wild visuals that are all about underground appeal. Flyers, album art, zines, they weren't just making music, they were constructing personas, worlds, and mythology through imagery. Across these genres, punk, garage horror, hip-hop, underground. The same principles. Create a universe, define your identity, and make fans feel like they're a part of it. And it wasn't just for fun. It attracted the right people and sometimes repelled the rest. And while hip-hop, punk, and garage horror were busy building their identities, metal was doing the same, but with an extra edge. Which brings us to Pushead and Metallica, the perfect bridge into the next chapter of our story. Let's take a closer look, shall we? And for anyone wondering why the influences here are so vast and varied, it's because of all of these scenes, all of these creators, all tapping into a shared cultural well. Comics, movie monsters, punk, hardcore, hip-hop, they all pulled from myth, archetypes, and pop culture and made it their own. That's the lineage we're following, and it's exactly what makes the story so rich. Between the panels and the channels, there's the visual imagery of music. First up, Metallica. By the mid-'80s, they were already building a visual universe just as intense as their music. And a big part of that was Pushead, the artist behind some of their most iconic artwork. Pushead's work was instantly recognizable. Skulls, decayed figures, amputees, chaos. And as a kid, spotting his signature was a game. One minute you're staring at a picture trying to see if it's his work, the next you know instantly. Even before most fans knew who he was, Pushead's art drew you in. Unnerving, gripping, and completely original. Metallica leaned on Pushead for their identity during this era, and the collaboration set a standard for heavy metal imagery that was both frightening and magnetic. Death magnetic. Some bands have members who are deeply involved in the art. They sketch, design, or conceptualize their imagery, and that naturally shapes how the artwork evolves. With Metallica, they trusted Pushead to translate their sound into visuals, which allowed the art to take on a life of its own while staying true to the band's identity and intensity. Yeah. Next, Slayer. If you want skulls, demonic imagery, and warnings from the underworld, you go to Slayer. Their artwork didn't just attract fans, it sent a message. We are not for everyone, and that's the point. Influences, horror comics, mythology, tribal symbols. The same ideas that have warned, fascinated, and inspired humans for centuries distilled into thrash metal. Pushead didn't just work for Metallica. He had a broader reach, touching other bands, collectors, and underground scenes. His art became a marker of credibility, and it's exactly why Metallica's visual identity from the mid-'80s is still unmatched. There's so much work he's done over the years for Aerosmith, hip-hop, Danzig, skateboarding culture, and more. But for this moment, we're staying in that Metallica era, because that's where the skulls, the chaos, and the mythos collide. From Metallica and Slayer's skulls, we start to see the DNA of metal imagery spread forward. But what happens when we move into the late 80s and 90s? Guns N' Roses, grunge, nu metal. The imagery didn't stop, it evolved. Next up, we're taking this story into the 90s. So I'll ask again, did it ever stop?
And it depends how far you want to go with the analog G-man.
Cut to the late 90s. Korn. Twisted, childlike, horror aesthetic. Limp Bizkit. Hyper-branded chaos. Linkin Park. The soldier logo. The hybrid theory imagery. And then, Eminem. Chainsaw Mask, Slim Shady as alter ego, comic book villain energy. These weren't just musicians, they were characters. From Metallica and Slayer skulls to Guns N' Roses personas to grunge anti-image image to nu metal avatars, it never stopped. The medium changes, the aesthetic shifts, but the instinct? Build a universe, create a symbol, become larger than life. And that's why next episode, we're going deep. Because if we're going to talk about universes, iconography, and imagery, you can't skim on Metallica. We're dedicating the whole episode to Metallica. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah. So here's the thing. From Staten Island to the Bay Area, from horror comics to hip-hop crews, from Pushead skulls to Guns N' Roses personas, from grunge logos to nu metal masks. Did it ever stop? No. The imagery changed, the medium changed, the culture shifted, but the instinct to build a world around your music, that never went away. Whether it was Slayer weaponizing skulls, Metallica trusting an underground artist to define an era, or 90s bands pretending they were above it while still printing logos on everything, the visuals always mattered. They still do. And we barely scratched the surface with Metallica tonight. Next time, we're going deep. The full visual evolution, the eras, the collaborations, the reinventions. Because if you think their imagery is just about the album covers, you haven't been paying attention. I'll see you in the next one.
I want to somehow communicate a message to my audience.